Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. People who were damn near murdered. What happened, and how did it go down? How did you get out? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Worked as a bouncer and had a few drunkards who got violent. I got very good at dodging thrown bottles. One day I get to the usual call to come and give someone the walk of shame. Well, I grab his shoulder and start walking him out, and before I realize something's happened, he stabbed me in the thigh and was about to go for my throat before he got glassed by a patron. A few stitches and a funny walk for a few weeks and I was fine, but that guy almost got me free drinks. His only problem with glassing the dude was, well, now I've got no beer. That's a bit sad. Got shot in the abdomen during a house invasion, was bleeding out, and the only thing that kept me alive was focusing on my breath and my buddy smacking me across the face and telling me nobody dies from a shot to the stomach. Obviously lying to me, but it helped keep me focused. And I guess the doctors too when I made it to the hospital. I got stabbed in the chest a few years ago during a fight with some bike thieves. Didn't notice at the time and escaped the fight and rode the bike away. Then I checked myself and discovered lots of blood. Went to nearby shop and sat down inside, put my finger in the hole and called the ambulance. I had a punctured lung and blood in the pleural cavity, but I was otherwise okay. The lad that did it went to prison. I was kidnapped, beaten, and had a gun held to my head while in the vehicle. I just agreed with everything he said, apologized for who knows what, and promised to do whatever he said and to not call the police. He let me out of the car at my workplace, and I immediately went in and called the police. I felt stupid for years afterwards, but now I realized whatever I did to live through that was the correct thing to do at the time. I was coming home from my restaurant job at like 2 a.m. I stopped at a sketchy Walgreens to grab some snacks. I was getting into my car when a dude ran up behind me yelling, my friend, please, you must help me." So I started. I turned and I saw a large man in front of me. He had a thick Haitian accent. He started frantically explaining that he had just arrived from Haiti and desperately needed a ride to his friend's house to reunite with his family. FYI, the giant earthquake in Haiti had just happened. Normally I try and help everyone I can, but this dude was giving me weird vibes, like he was on a lot of drugs. I politely declined and he got aggressive, and I ended up just hopping into my car and driving quickly away. The next morning I saw on the news he had convinced 2 young girls to give him a ride. He pulled out a knife and forced them to drive about 100 miles away. He then made them park on the side of the road somewhere and started stabbing them. One died and the other ran away and got help. He got shot by the police trying to get away. My ex-wife was behind the wheel of her car with the door open. I was standing between her and the door trying to talk to her. She reversed hard out of the parking lot and the door knocked me back. She then floored it straight at me as I was trying to get up. Only recourse was to jump on the hood. Got my fingers on one hand of the hood lip by the windshield and hung on for dear life. Got thrown off and hit my back and head against the curb when she went around a curve in the apartment complex. She ran before she got tracked down by SPs on the base we worked at. I don't know how fast she was going, probably not more than 15 to 25 miles per hour, but don't let that action movie fool you. Jumping on a hood is neither easy nor fun. It's effing terrifying. When I was 7 years old, I was locked, master lock, key was with one of them in a dog kennel I barely fit into my mom's boyfriend's kids. They took the kennel out to the above-ground pool and held it on the edge, joking like they were going to drop it. They ended up doing just that, and I was under in seconds. The plate at the bottom of the kennel made it hard for them to pull it back out, so they had to turn it on its side and then pull it out. They didn't bother setting me down, though. They just dropped me. I remember the feeling of my hands crammed through the holes in the kennel with grass between them. I heard some arguing and what I assume was fighting. The old brother came to my rescue and let me out. I slept in his room for the rest of the summer till I went home to my dad's. Oof. I was 21. It was a murder-suicide attempt. He drove me into a river at 2 a.m. on a below-freezing night about 30 miles from town. I was asleep in the passenger seat and woke up when the water hit my legs. The doors wouldn't open due to the pressure, but luckily the windows were down. We swam out. I dragged him to shore. He laid on the riverbank and cried while incoherently apologizing. I led us through the woods for hours until we found a farmhouse. I was mostly fine, but had hypothermia and a torn ACL. I told him to kill himself ASAP and leave me out of it. Then I never spoke to him again. We were not together, nor had we ever been. We were just friends and former roommates. I'll never understand why he wanted to take me with him. That's a truly harrowing experience, especially when it was completely unexpected. I'm glad that you're all right, and sorry that you went through that. And to everybody who went through any of these things today. A father killed his wife, then came to the school looking to kill his son. The staff convinced him his son was not there after he threatened to kill everyone in my class. He was caught in Indiana on his way to kill his parents. He was schizophrenic, could not afford his medicine anymore, and had an episode where he thought the world was ending, so he was going to kill his family so they would not suffer. Him holding a knife at someone's grandmother's throat while yelling, "I'll kill them all, they're already dead," was extremely terrifying to a class of 7-year-olds. When I was 23, I was robbed at gunpoint by a guy who was about my age, maybe a bit younger. I disassociated immediately after the encounter, so my memories of the event are sort of in the third person and weird, but I remember he asked me if I had any valuables that he hadn't already taken, while he was pointing the gun in my face. I told him he could check my pockets. He briefly got this look of shame on his face and let me go. I guess pointing a gun is impersonal, but reaching into a woman's front and butt pockets felt wrongly intimate and crossed a boundary for him. From what I remember, the only valuables he got were $14, an almost 3-year-old Android phone, and a third-generation Kindle. Was basically a functional light drug addict when I was a teenager. An acquaintance and I were held against our will, and she didn't make it. I did. It took 3 days. It was a normal day. We went out with a friend and 2 acquaintances to a relatively normal house, but our drinking water was drugged. Ended up at the other friend's house. I realized once we got inside that there were no doorknobs, windows were nailed shut, etc. Phones and clothes were taken. The other girl was far more gone and already working the streets. I never did, so they'd take her out and bring her back. Was beaten up pretty badly, drugged out of my mind, etc. Stopped fighting back. They didn't take me out of the house except to lock me in a shed sometimes. I pretended to be more drugged than I really was and listened to what the guys talked about. It was where to leave our bodies. One day, she and the other 2 went out doing what she did. The guy watching the house and me fell asleep. He'd been strung out for days, and he just failed at a suicide attempt in front of me, so it was a deep sleep. They hadn't locked me in the shed that day, but left me in the main house as I'd become compliant and learned to act more drugged than I really was. Got my phone out from under the guy. They were trying to make it look like I left on my own accord, throw off friends and family. Charged it for 10 minutes while I found someone else's clothes and shoes, ripped out most of my fingernails, getting a window open, ran until I couldn't breathe and called for help, and got clean, over a decade ago. The other girl was never seen again. When I was an early teenager, I went to a friend's house whose older sister was having a party. It had alcohol, but very limited. Her parents were home, and we mostly played video games and cards. But more people than expected showed up, including some people who had already graduated. This one guy was a former high school jock loser who started in on making fun of me and hitting on me. The parents asked him to leave, and he did, making a bit of a fuss, but eventually walking out. I was all upset and crying, and wanted to go home. But home was a mile-ish walk through some woods and dark roads, so her parents told me they would drive me home in a bit when the party was over. I was still upset, and I was very dumb, so after a bit I snuck out and walked home. A few hundred yards from my house, Someone hit me with something. I was told it was a baseball bat and stabbed me in the stomach several times. I do not remember any of this, nor do I remember someone finding me bleeding in a ditch and taking me to a hospital. If I had been there for much more time, I probably would have bled out and died in a ditch. When I was around 10 years old, my abusive father decided I need to learn how to swim. He just threw me into the lake. I was struggling and he did nothing. I lost consciousness and almost drowned. Random adult guy saved me from drowning. My father twisted the story to make it seem like he lost me out to the site when I clearly remember him standing near, watching as I sank down. I'm still scared of deep water. I'm almost 30 and I can't swim. I never tried again after that experience. I was at a summer camp when I was in my early teens. It was a small school since it wasn't used during the summer anyways. An older kid who I often got into fights with was strangling me against a wall, but on the other side of the wall was a classroom, and I could hear people in it. So, when I couldn't get him off of me, I repeatedly banged my fist against the wall as hard as I could. It didn't take long for a counselor to investigate, and they pulled him off me. I don't know if it's murdered, but I had a gun pointed in my face when fishing near a weed grow, 0607-ish. I was hiking up a river fishing for the day, going up smaller tributaries for trout in the fall. I was a few miles in and came around a bend to riverside plants as tall as me. I was 16 and didn't care. I was fishing. As I'm working up the water, I hear some rustling. Turn around and there's a man with me at gunpoint maybe 10 feet away. I said, "I'm so sorry. I'm just here to fish. I'll turn around. I'm sorry." He just stood there, said nothing. I began walking back downstream, waiting for my time to end. Longest minute of my life. Now here's the kicker. I forgot my stringer. I was in cargo shorts. I had a couple of fish with deep hook sets, so I kept them to eat. I put them in a cargo pocket and dipped my legs into the water here and there. Through this entire incident, they were floundering in my pocket making noise. I could only laugh about it in hindsight, my shaking in fear, accompanied by my left leg pocket bouncing erratically. I went out with a woman who was separated from her husband. She had filed for divorce and had a restraining order against him. She stayed over one night, and the fire alarm at the building across the street went off. Everyone ended up outside at 2 a.m. in October. Her car had been parked around the side of that building. Fast forward 6 weeks, and her Stebex followed her, then boyfriend, from her house in the morning. Tried to run him off the road and shot him 3 times, including in the face. STBX admitted that he knew she was at the apartment complex I lived in. Her mechanic also later found a GPS tracker that had been wired into the fuse box to track her movements, how he found her that night. I'm pretty sure he was armed that night, and by chance picked the building she was parked next to and activated the alarm. Thankfully, the wrong building. When I was about 5 years old, my family was having dinner at a family friend's house. They had a kid my age, so after dinner we went up to his room to play. I don't remember what happened, but my dad said that he realized that after a while of us playing, that we were suddenly making no noise. And anyone who has kids know that kids going from making a ton of noise to no noise is a bad sign. So he went upstairs to check on us, thinking we had broken something. Then when he opened the door to the room, he saw me lying on the ground and the kid choking me by pressing his foot against my windpipe while smiling. My dad shoved him off of me, obviously, since I'm typing this, and as far as I'm aware, I didn't have any brain damage from losing oxygen. I've probably had more near-death experiences than I realized, but the one that sticks with me is when an idiot electrical tech removed my lockout tag from the DC power plant and turned the system back on while I was working on it. Apparently, lockout tagout means nothing when it's 5 p.m. and you want to go home. Yes, if I had been touching anything when he did it, I would be dead right now. I was letting a guy who had fallen on hard times stay with me for a bit. He was difficult to live with, but I was understanding because he was autistic and had a TBI. He also carried more than his weight of household chores and stuff. But he crossed a few too many lines, mostly through absent-mindedness or misunderstandings, but it was difficult. He finally crossed one willfully and knowingly that really pissed me off. So later that day, I told him he had 24 hours to get out of my house. He flew off his chain, as I expected he might have. Lots of yelling, threats, crying, even hitting me occasionally. I recorded it all and reacted as little as possible. Finally, he charged into my bedroom with a knife. I didn't think that, when I decided I was going to kick him out, he'd escalated to that level, but I knew it was a possibility and was ready for it, so I had my handgun on me. Luckily, he had trouble getting it open, and I think he hesitated after charging at me. That gave me enough time to draw, and when he realized that, he ran to the other side of the house. I went out on the porch and called the cops. He told them a wildly different story that they believed over mine at first. When they came out of the house to cuff me after all this, I told them I had a video. They let me show it to them, and that changed things real quick. When I was 14, I went to a local fair with a couple of friends. There were some older guys there causing trouble. Some people I knew were going to try and fight them. I didn't want any part of it and left. On my way back to the ones I knew ran past me. One of the older guys was chasing them, stopped in front of me and asked if I was with them. I said no. He called me a lying "see you next Tuesday" and hit me. I fell over and he started kicking me. Then his mates joined in. I woke up about 10 minutes later. Head was pounding. I couldn't see properly, couldn't breathe properly, and was dizzy for 3 weeks. One of them threw a brick at the back of my head while I was on the ground. Apparently, he had tried to lift a stack of bricks, still cemented together, to drop on me but couldn't pick it up. Only reason I'm alive is because he wasn't strong enough. That was 22 years ago, and I'm still part deaf in my left ear, having a spot on my head that hurts if I press it, and get nervous if my back's not against a wall when I'm out. Way back in 8th grade, another student attempted to stab me in the throat. The situation was the teacher left the room for a few minutes. I don't remember why, but it's not important. The friend sitting next to me got up to go talk to someone on the other side of the room, but left all his things, including a completed homework assignment that was due in our next class. The girl sitting in front of us turned around and grabbed it. Now, while we weren't close friends, I'd always considered myself on good and friendly terms with this girl. I made a comment along the lines of, "Hey, don't copy his work, do it yourself." But I completely meant it as a joking way, as I often joked with her, and thought, she was just taking it to check his answers against hers. She responded in a rather blunt tone. "Why don't you mind your own business?" I don't know why I said it. I don't know why it came to my mind, and I absolutely regret it, but I just blurted out, "Why don't you go eat a donut?" Again, I don't know where that came from. If it was a line from a show or cartoon buried in the back of my mind, but there's no real excuse for saying it. We jokingly made fun of each other a lot, but I had never once made fun of her weight before this. Anyway, she didn't respond. She simply stood up and walked away. I sat there for another minute or two before I heard someone across the room shout my name, followed by, "Look out!" Still sitting at the desk, I turned my head just in time to see her behind me with an arm raised that she thrust down toward me. She'd gotten up to go sharpen her pencil before coming back up behind me to attempt to stab me in the throat. I got both my arms up in time to stop her, slightly redirect the trajectory of the pencil, but it still grazed my neck, scraping the skin and causing a penetrate my throat like she was intending. I sat there holding off an arm, holding the pencil, while she pounded me in the head with her other hand for a few minutes until a couple of teachers rushed in following the commotion and were able to pull her off. In the end, she was only suspended for a week, but was removed from my class when she came back. I did play down the event when talking to the school administrators because I felt bad about what I had said to instigate it, and because, again, I did feel like we were friendly before this and didn't want her to get expelled with less than a month left in the school year. I found out after the fact from others in the class that she had previously killed her stepfather at a young age after a few years of enduring serious physical abuse from him. Apparently, This was common knowledge to most of the class who had grown up around her, but I had no idea, as I'd only transferred into that school for like 1 school year. So yeah, even though she very much tried to kill me, I still feel bad for her.